Welcome to the Rant Live. Welcome to the early morning edition of the Rant Live. Hopefully we'll have lots of viewers. Maybe people will come back and watch it after we record, and certainly I'm sure the podcast for our early morning edition. Hi, Evan.
Hello.
How are you
today? It's
not
really early morning for me. It's like mid-morning at least. It's earlier for you. But like I was just saying, I've been up for 5 hours anyway. I got up at 5:30. Tuesdays and Thursdays, man, 5:30. I'm up early. I got a workout in, everything. I barely made it down here. I do this from the basement in my house, and my office is on our second floor. So like I had to come all the way down here, and then I realized I'd done a podcast upstairs a couple days ago. So I got back down, my headphone, my mic weren't here. So I walked back. I'm old. I'm not as old as you, but I'm old. And going
who
up
you
and down
calling
the stairs,
old?
You. And going up and down the
cool.
stairs after having deadlifted this morning is not my idea of fun. And then doing it twice is even worse. So I'm like, no, I'm just sitting here in the chair, and I hope I can get back up. So we'll see.
Okay, well, maybe we should record that later and watch it.
No, we really should. No, we're perfectly fine. Perfectly fine not doing that.
Well, we have a special guest today. You all know her as a host and field reporter for the Chicago Cubs and Marquee Sports Network. Let's bring on Taylor McGregor. Taylor, nice having you today.
You know, I'm just sitting here. First of all, thanks for having me on, but really inspired, Evan, by your early morning efforts. Now, if you could just share some of that motivation to me, because my alarm went off at 7 and I still had to snooze 10 times because I was on Phoenix time, and it just feels really early. So the fact that you also came back from Phoenix, you have children to attend to, and you were able to do all of this, I'm quite impressed.
Well, part of it is it's not really a preferable thing. But my son made his middle school baseball team, and we'd been doing some working out, and he started to lift. He's 13, and I'd compiled some stuff in it, and I said, well, you've got choices. We're not going to quit working out, but he's got practice till 4:30. I was like, your one choice is you get on with practice, you come home, we eat some dinner, and we go to the gym in the evening a little bit later, or we get up early, we work out before school twice a week, and you can do it that way. And then just you get done, you shower, you straight to school. And he was like, yeah, I'll do that. And so that was more his choice. But it's easy for him.
Now your choice.
He's done. Yeah. Well, now it's also mine. Yeah. But I actually kind of like it because I've got enough stuff. We just work out in the garage, and thankfully it's been, the other day wasn't great, but it's been getting better. I don't have to run the space heater. So, but it's a lot better at like 6 than it is at 5:30. Once you get a couple of those lifts in, it works out pretty well. And then seeing it, it's cool to watch it, ideally pay off for him. So we'll see. But that's once you get back and adjusted to the time, you can get it going.
I'm going to be looking for the before and after pictures, Evan.
Yes.
So
no, I've got this is like
of you, not of
as
son.
I say this, I'm looking at like a good, like John, the beer that we got when we were out there, and does nothing to compare. I got a big shipment, so I'm looking at like my beer fridge and a whole bunch of stuff over here. So I do a few too many like 16-ounce curls in addition to my workout routine.
So the before and after is like before looks better than after.
It's just yeah, it's I still have a distinct dad bod. It's just like my pants fit a little better. So that's really
well, welcome to the show, Taylor.
That. Well, I was just going to say, I am the perfect example of sometimes when I work out harder than I think I can eat worse.
Yeah.
So I'm like, this is counterproductive for me because I'm so much more hungry. I'm like, oh, now I can eat a pizza because I worked out today. So
yeah, that's exactly how it works.
That's kind of the whole point, right? That's what I thought, at least. Especially as you get older.
But this is when
you're young, you're all ambitious.
Screen time we have to have, John. You and I just have to be on here. We're not trying to be presentable to like more than 5 or 6 people at a time. So
yeah, we have maybe hundreds of viewers versus millions. So yeah, it's a little bit different for us. A little less pressure. But welcome to the show. As we like to say, the production value around here is we kind of make fun of it a little bit because it's not that great usually. So I'd like to apologize in advance if the production level falls well short of your
I think it's
your normal
great.
experience.
Well, you guys are well lit. I definitely need to invest in a ring light. I've been saying that I'm going to do that for 2 years now, and I haven't. So, I definitely need to do that because you guys are well lit. You have awesome backgrounds, and I have neither. So I think you guys are way ahead of me when it comes to that. So I'm impressed.
I've got
All
my,
right.
my Looney Cube. I won't
See?
shine it in
I
anybody's
need
face.
one of those.
This thing
That's
is
like
great.
half of my face is lit from the window.
Yeah, this thing is really good. I've been happy with that one, and it's all, it's remote and all that good stuff. But typically I will forget to charge it, and then so you will generally find I think it's fully charged now. We just go about halfway through a
Go
show
out
every once in a
halfway.
while, and all of a sudden it just goes
You
dark.
can't see it.
So,
Okay.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
Hence the production value. So
not anything's perfect.
I was preparing for the show, and the realization settled upon me that we are interviewing somebody who does this for a living, and suddenly I got like very nervous. I was like, oh my God, she's going to be critiquing the questions. So that's why I come out, and not that I think you are, but I'm just saying, like, that's why I just wanted to kind of set the level, your expectations really low.
Yeah.
I'm just happy to be on. Truly.
Well, thanks for joining us. So you joined the Cubs at the start of the 2020 season, just as Marquee was starting up. What was that transition like, moving from a team like the Rockies, a smaller market team, to a larger market team like the Cubs?
It was really exciting. I sort of started interviewing for the job in November of 2019. So it had been in the works. I got to go to Cubs convention in early 2020 when the world was normal. And that absolutely blew me away. I mean, I couldn't believe the extent of that, where Cub fans came from all over the country to attend this event, and just the production that it takes to put that thing on. That was my first taste of, oh boy, I'm not in Kansas anymore. And I really enjoyed it. And then, the pandemic hit. So it's been very different for me the last 2 seasons, really, because I haven't gotten the full experience of what the job would normally be like. But I think the thing that stands out to me is even the travel that I have done, although it's been limited, every game feels like a home game. You go everywhere and Cub fans show up everywhere. And that is so fun and so cool. And, even for me, I remember I was doing a game at Florida State for ESPN, because I do some college football stuff. And one of the referees was a huge Cub fan, and he stops me and says, Taylor, and that, just the reach of Cubs Nation is crazy. And that's what, really stands out to me when I think about the difference. I don't think I experienced that as much in Colorado, but, and with the Cubs, it's real. Cubs Nation is amazing, and they're everywhere.
Yeah. So is it more kind of like a feeling of celebrity, almost being associated with the Cubs and being recognized maybe more at more places than you would have before, or, maybe not just in Chicago?
I wouldn't say celebrity as much as you can just feel the extent of the franchise and how far it reaches. And, even you hear stories of, I became a fan because my grandfather's grandfather's grandfather, and just the generational impact that this organization has had on families. That's what stands out to me. So I would just say the reach. I wouldn't necessarily say the celebrity, but just, how many fans there are all across the country. And then when you talk to them, their stories of why they became Cub fans are so cool. And in Denver, the franchise is under 30 years old. So I've basically been alive for the entirety of the franchise. And, there's no such thing as my grandfather's grandfather's grandfather was a Rockies fan who brought me over. And that's what's different in Chicago.
I actually lived in Colorado when the Rockies started, and it was
Really?
cool because they started playing in Mile High. I don't know if you remember that, Evan, but
Yeah.
it was insane. And they were selling Mile High out, and that was
Yeah.
like 100,000 people. It was like they reconfigured the entire stadium, and it was a trip.
they still have the attendance record, and it will never really be broken because Mile High holds a capacity that none of the other stadiums hold. So even if you sell out every single game, you're still not going to reach the attendance record. Yeah, it was special first few seasons there for sure.
Yeah, that was I always had I considered the Rockies for a while. Well, now, and as a Chris Bryant fan, I can let my Rockies flag fly a little bit more. But I have a lot of family out in Denver, so we've gone to Rockies games in the past. I was actually out there for my cousin's wedding last summer. We went to a Rockies A's game, not quite as well attended as some others, but I was out. When would that have been? 12? Was it 92 that they were formed?
Yeah.
And then 12, I think that was. So I was out there when they had the 20th anniversary. So they had like Andres Galarraga and Dante Bichette and Larry Walker were all out there.
Blake Street Bombers.
Yeah, the Blake Street Bombers. And I was there because the Cubs were playing there, and I happened to schedule a business trip. And I actually got to see Junior Lake's debut, and he got a double, and it was just kind of a cool. There's always that tie. Because when I was a kid, that was like neat. We got 2 new teams. We got the Rockies and the Marlins, and so anyway, that aside, I was wondering about, because you talked about going to Cubs convention and getting kind of, I don't know if you can really be acclimated to it, but getting that you're drinking through a fire hose, I'm sure, right? Brand new network, brand new fan base, and then 2 months later, the whole thing shuts down. What was that like for you, trying to make that transition, get your feet under you with this whole new venture, and then boom, everything's gone, there's no baseball for a while? How were you able to handle that and just kind of balance the new duties and responsibilities of this job with not actually having a team to cover for a while?
It was wild. And it was hard for everybody across baseball who covers the sport. For Marquee, we had this momentum, we had launched, and it felt like, okay, the season is progressing. I had done every spring training game up to that point. And so I felt like I was getting to know the guys. We were on a good path, and boom, the world shuts down. And then, quarantine was weird for everybody. But then the part when we came back and I could not do my job even remotely the same way that I had become accustomed the past several years. That was the hardest part because I didn't have the type of relationship with the players that some of the other reporters had. And I mean, it was hard for everybody, whether you'd known the guys for 30 years or not. So it just seemed impossible. Everything was over Zoom and everybody had the same stuff. It was hard for me because, I'm trying to tell a little bit different stories than you might read in the paper, and there was just no avenue to sort of go about getting them. And that was really, really hard. And, I think for me professionally, it was like, oh, I'm being judged on this work that's not even the way that I would actually do my job. And so, yeah, it was hard in a way to be, feel like I was being judged by that. But at the same time, like, I'm confident in the reporter that I am and who I am. So I tried to not let that stuff bother me, and just knew that it would get better one day. And this is a global pandemic and everybody's going through a hard time, and I'm not the only one. So I'm not going to feel sorry for myself. So it was definitely weird, and hope all that stuff is in the rear view, hopefully. And we never have to go through that again. But I think one day we'll look back and in a way be thankful to say, I was there. I covered that. I was at Wrigley on opening day in 2020 when nobody else was there. I was the only person in the stands. And there's a part of that I'll cherish forever, because it was unique and so weird and different. And I got to be a part of that, whether I really would have chosen that or not, I don't know. But, I'm trying to now look at it in a positive light.
Yeah, I can't imagine that was the dream that unfolded when you were first offered the Cubs job, was like, your first game being in an empty stadium with absolutely no fans and people yelling at you from the rooftops. What was that experience like? Could you literally, because we went to some games on the rooftops, could you could hear the guys that were up on the rooftops from inside the stadium? Like, was that kind of a weird feeling?
It was super weird. And the Cubs opened with Milwaukee that year in 2020. And I remember Ryan Braun coming to bat and you heard the boos really loud. And that was, or wait, was Ryan Braun gone and it was Yelich? And maybe that's what we were talking about.
Could have been either of them.
Yeah, actually, I
Either
think it was
way.
Yelich who was getting booed because
Disliked the
Braun
same
was
amount.
gone. Now that I say that, but I just remember the boos, and that was fun to hear. And I know Yelich said something like, "Of course, they still found a way to boo me." So that was surreal for sure. Yeah, you mentioned, this isn't exactly what I dreamt of. I had gone to day games at Wrigley before as a fan, and I remember specifically it was the Cubs Diamondbacks 2016. It was June of 2016, going to a game, and I just graduated college thinking, oh my gosh, if I could work here one day, that would be about as good as it gets. So certainly when the job presented itself and I got it, that was what I was thinking of, is those atmospheres, the day games, and especially that year, because I think everybody at that point sort of knew the team was special. And so, that was what I wanted to replicate that season. And it was the exact opposite, with 0 fans in attendance.
Well, you talked about opening day in 2016, and I was kind of reminiscing yesterday because opening day 2016 was in Anaheim. It was the same night as the NCAA championship, and I was in Anaheim. It was why you talked about this earlier. Like, you go on the road and there's tons of Cubs fans there. It was wild to go out to Anaheim and have, like, I went, as I work a regular job in addition to my my fame here as a podcaster and blogger, but I was out there again on a business trip. It's amazing how many of my business trips have somehow coincided with Cubs games being on the road.
How lucky.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's really incredible. Don't know how that works, but I was out there with a coworker.
Coincidence.
Yeah, totally coincidence. And we go to there's a brew pub just north of the ballpark, and I knew like 5 people in line. And we go inside, and I know a bunch more people in there, and Danny Rocket and Luis Medina from Bleacher Nation and Bleed Cubby Blue and San Ranto podcast, respectively. And then Joel Cummins, who's a keyboard player for Humphreys McGee, was in there. He's a friend of mine. He's coming over and hanging out. And my coworker's looking at me. She is not, she's from Texas originally. She was like, "Are you famous or what?" Like, I'm like, "No, we all knew we were going to be here." Right. I was like, but it was wild to be like, we all knew something special was happening, and I'm actually driving toward a point here, so bear with me. But but you could go around
through this all the time, Taylor.
Yeah, and you see all these pictures on Twitter that were yesterday from Cubs fans who were there in Anaheim at the start of that season, because everybody knew. First of all, it's a much nicer weather in Anaheim for opening day than it typically is in Chicago, so it's a great trip. But I guess getting back to that, this is really, so you talk about 2020 opening day, ballpark is empty. 2021 opening day, 25% capacity or whatever it was at the time, 30%, whatever. Now, however, it's open. It's a new season. You've got a full ballpark. Does that, or are you looking at this a little bit differently, just as part of, this is like your first regular season on the gig, right? Like, this is, you get to finally cover a full ballpark right from the start, and ideally a full season. Do you look at it that way? I mean, are you kind of maybe a little bit more hyped up than usual to kind of really get started with this thing?
Absolutely. And not just for 100% capacity. Obviously, that is so important, and I cannot wait for that. But for me, clubhouse access, being able to be on the team charter and back to the normal way of traveling as a broadcaster, and just being able to build those relationships with the players and get better stories and talk to guys when I want to talk to them and not have to wait for them to be on the Zoom call that week, or, schedule an interview a week out. So I cannot even tell you how excited I am. It's going to be so much fun. And look, the last few years, you sort of felt like, oh, this job isn't as fun as I thought it, as I remember it being. And it's like, well, yeah, because everything fun about the job has been eliminated. It was sort of like the relationships that you get to build and the people that you get to be around and the fun things that you get to do, the travel, like, that's so much fun. And with all that stripped away, and all you do is just appear on live TV, like that's not as fulfilling to me as building those relationships, even with fans. I mean, the fact that I could go out to the berm and meet you guys and hang with you, like that fills me up so much. In the last couple of years, I haven't been able to do that. So people definitely are the reason that I do this job. And when you kind of took that away from me the last few years, it's been hard. So I am so excited to have that all back. And, hopefully we get to talk again down the line. And I'm saying like, this is exactly what I dreamed of. I knew this was going to be good. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, the whole COVID experience, I think this is true for everybody, but maybe even a little bit more so for you and the players on the Cubs, kind of probably brought you a little closer together when like you go through, a couple seasons like we've just gone through, and then you see them at the beginning of this season and things are kind of much more normal. And it's kind of like, it has to feel like really refreshing, not just for you, but for the players. Is there like an extra level of camaraderie that you think you've built, even though maybe you hadn't had the chance to develop those same relationships?
I would definitely say players have stopped us in the clubhouse and said, wow, we're glad you're back. We've missed this. And that's a special bond, because sometimes you're in the clubhouse and you think they don't want me here at all. But the fact that they went without that for 2 years and now having us back, they actually realized, oh, we like this. We want you in here. That's been special. I think what's challenging about answering that question from a Cubs reporter perspective is the turnover. If I was dealing with the same guys that I was dealing with in 2020, maybe, but obviously the clubhouse has changed. So I think there's a level of camaraderie with these guys that's unique simply because they're young and they're new to the big leagues. They want to be on TV. They want to get interviewed. As time goes on, that's not necessarily how everybody feels. So
yeah, they kind of hide from you. Well, we were out in Arizona and we were talking about when, Javi and Chris Bryant and all the bigger guys were on the team. There's that path that goes from the player facility into the stadium at Sloan Park. And we started talking about how the players, as they got really good and after 2016, they wouldn't come down that path anymore. They'd take a golf cart around the back and they'd avoid the fans. But now you've got all the young players who are coming down there. They're signing autographs. They're stopping. They're talking. We were talking about how refreshing that is to kind of see that change. And it's kind of the exact same thing, right?
Absolutely. That's such a great way to put it and a great example of once you've been around the block a little, you kind of get burnt out, and it's nice to get some fresh faces that appreciate, the Cubs Nation, appreciate my job, wanting to tell stories. So not that those other guys didn't, but they had done it so much, it wasn't as alluring anymore because they had done it so much. And there was a lot of demand for those guys because they were such stars. So I don't necessarily blame them for the way that, they might have avoided the fans a little or the media because they'd certainly done a lot over the years. But it is nice to have some younger faces in there and guys who are excited to step into a new role.
Yeah, that's got to make your job just a little bit kind of, I don't know if it's more fun or easier or what the way to describe it is, but where you've got, if you look forward as Cubs fans, when we look at what's happening right now after the trade deadline and kind of the younger faces that are coming up, a lot of uncertainty around the team and how they're going to perform this year and the next couple of years. As fans, that can kind of get you a little tense, But as someone that's in your position, it's actually kind of a cool thing because you get to meet all these new faces. You get to establish lots of new relationships. And that's I assume you enjoy that part of it.
No doubt. And just sort of being there from the beginning, I think you develop a level of respect with the players that will never go away. I felt that in Colorado with some of the guys who debuted when I was there. No matter how big of stars they become, I think they'll always, sort of have a respect for me that's different because I was there from day one. And I feel the same way about the players who are getting brought up now, to be there from day one, you just have a different level of respect, of connection with somebody. So that's what's exciting for me, being there when Frank Swandell came up and had those great 2 months, We'll see the way that he performs this year, but it's been cool to be there and to kind of share that with him. And now as he goes on through the rest of his career, hopefully just keep that relationship that we have. So it is cool. It's really a unique situation to be in, especially because it's basically the whole team.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So not just a couple players.
Oh, we've noticed.
Yeah.
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 Well,
We
No,
may have
then-
talked about that a couple times here.
Oh,
Well,
really?
Yeah, oddly enough. What's nice to break up the monotony of us just whining about stuff. But no, but there have been a few people, and I think that's one of the neat things. So we've talked about this on here as well as we've had some guests. Oddly enough, much easier to get guys when they're in the minor leagues. But to be able to follow that journey, and a couple of those, and I think I'm not gonna lie, I was cutting some onions last night when I saw the Ethan Roberts stuff, because
So good.
Ethan's a guy. I won't go into the whole story. I won't bore you with it. I've shared it a million times already about how I got to know him. But like we've had Scott Efros on the show, and I've interviewed him from the time that he was at Myrtle Beach before changing to sidearm. And so to follow that journey, and then you feel invested
Yes.
in these guys, and then you see that, and I think everyone, even if you didn't know him, Ethan, that is the video from last night, and you see this guy talking to the media afterwards with this smile on his face that looks like it's going to split his whole head in half because he's walking on air. That's I just, for someone like yourself, who I'm sure that's a story you're going to follow a little bit, right, as he's coming up with the club. But are there some guys in particular or some different angles that you're kind of, I don't want you to give away, any of your material that you're building, but are there any particular stories you're kind of digging into right now or planning out for the next few weeks, or just letting it happen organically?
Yeah, well, there's certainly a lot of stuff that just happens organically, and it might be something I see in the moment that you follow up on, but just sort of a broad approach, like you were mentioning. I mean, I think of Justin Steele and the story that he was last year coming up out of the pen and then getting stretched out as a starter, and just his mentality. He's such a competitor. I love watching him pitch. And I trust him because of that mentality. And he's kind of a guy that I knew from day one. And I'm excited to see how his season plays out. And there's some stories like that. I think Ildemar Vargas, he had a great spring. I have a great relationship with him. Obviously, he just got optioned to AAA, but maybe there's depth needed in the middle infield and he gets brought up. And that's kind of a fun story to me. The potential that he could provide. Patrick Wisdom is a great story. We've all heard about it. We know, what makes his game great, the things that he needs to work on, but also just the story of him being a 30-year-old rookie. And I actually knew some people who knew him. So I had kind of, heard about him for years before I met him as a reporter. So that's a fun story to follow too. So I think there's a lot of good stories on this team that are going to be really interesting to see how they play out. Frank Swandell, I mentioned it. He had a great 2 months. Well, what's the season going to be like over the course of 162 games? Can he be a legit first baseman for this team and somebody who hits maybe even 280 over the course of 162 games? We'll see. So to answer your question, there's a lot of stuff that I'm following. I don't know if I have anything specifically for you right now, but I just think overall there's a lot of numbers and trends that we'll keep our eyes on through the course of the season that I think are going to be fun to follow.
Yeah, I've got to admit that, it was kind of weird. Obviously when the Cubs traded Anthony Rizzo and all the other guys, it was heartbreaking, to be honest. I was actually in Chicago. I live in Phoenix, Arizona, but I was in Chicago. I usually go for a couple weeks at a time and stay with a friend near Wrigley and go to games with my two boys who are 8 and 9. Mm-hmm. And we were staying there and I was, covering it for the blog Cubs Insider. And as the trades were happening and I'm posting things and my kids come in and they're crying because they're watching the stuff unfold on TV as I was inside. And I'm sitting here trying to type up stuff. I've got my kids crying because Chris Bryant and Anthony Rizzo have been traded. I'm like, it was a very emotional time. and it was just weird. And then you get to past that, right? And then you have a guy named Frank Swandell that comes up, and you've never heard of him, and there couldn't be like just a more perfect name. Like, that's not like a guy you think, like, I had never heard of Frank Swandell, I'm going to admit. But to see him and like, as you mentioned, like that story unfold and to watch it kind of become something where it's like, and he seems like a really cool, like fun loving guy I mean, think about what it took for him to get to the major leagues. Like, he's played baseball his entire life, 30 years, well, maybe not 30 years, but up until he was in his 30s, and he's finally made it. I mean, like, what's the energy from a guy like that versus the energy from a guy that's young and prodigious talent?
I think the best way to put it would probably be a different type of appreciation. I think I'm going to put Patrick Wisdom in this category, Frank Swandell. They've sort of been burned by the game. They've had challenges. Frank Swandell was up with the Oakland A's. I think he hit a homer in his first game and then was optioned and then DFA'd. And so it was like, what can I do more to stick in this game? And then obviously he gets his chance with the Cubs and sort of runs with it. And there's a long list of things that he went through throughout the course of his career. Patrick Wisdom, the same way, a first round pick, couldn't really stick. He had ups and downs. And then he kind of finds a spot with the Cubs, and he hit 28 homers last year. So I think they understand the spot that they've been given a little bit more. With the Rockies, Trevor Story, this is what I think of in 2017 when he came up. And you remember he hit like 10 homers and crazy amount of homers in his first like 2 weeks in the big leagues. And I remember Carlos Gonzalez saying, like, the game's about to humble him. Like, you can't hit that many homers forever. And I think when you're with some of the younger players who haven't maybe experienced the trials and tribulations of baseball in the major leagues, they're just, everything is perfect. Nothing could go wrong. Oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing ever. And there's an appreciation and almost like, I can't believe I'm here factor. And then with some of those older guys, I think there is the same, like, I'm so appreciative. I can't believe I'm here. But it's also like, I've been through so much to get here that I'm sort of, in a different way appreciating how hard it was to get there. If that makes any sense, there's just sort of a little, I think the older guys sort of have a different view of how hard it is to really make it to the major leagues, and a different type of appreciation, if that makes sense. But Frank's awesome because he's such a normal dude. And Wisdom's the same way. There's so many guys with the Cubs right now that you're like, you're so normal. They go, Frank goes back to New Jersey and lives with his wife's parents. It's just, they're just so normal and things that we all do, so it's been fun to cover them.
Now that's, that has been really cool. And we noticed, like my son, he was there with me at spring training. He got pictures along the walkway, as John was talking about. It was just interesting to note how, guys like Swandell and Wisdom would stop and get pictures. And when Wisdom was leaving, right, he left the game just a little bit early, I think, and we had left. We were going back to the backfield, and he's leaving the ballpark. But as he's walking down there, he's still signing for people, getting pictures, and thanking people.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. And I think that was so cool. It's like, hey, we're getting this appreciation. Like, those guys weren't used to fans knowing who they were. Because, I mean, Frank Swandell's a really nondescript dude. There's no way you're picking him out and saying, that's a ball player. That guy, came up and starred for the Cubs for sure. Like, he's the last person you'd pick. Or, again, I look at somebody like Roberts. But if you're looking into some stuff, there's some cool, and maybe you already have this, so I'm not, but neat statistical things, I think, and these are guys who I'm following anyway, but you look at Ethan Roberts' spin rates, the fact that he set the record for spin rate at Vanderbilt, despite the fact that he never went to Vanderbilt, but he's got the highest spin rate recorded there in their ballpark. And then if you look at Scott Efros, no other pitcher in baseball releases the ball more to the third base side than he does with his sidearm delivery. So fun things there. And I know you all have covered that and talked about it with his changes, but I know one of the things I'm really looking forward to is seeing how that development pipeline works out and seeing how many more of these new guys come up through the system. So I'm looking forward to the coverage and just being able to watch every day and get that. I know, certainly the early going was rough with 2020, but it's nice to have. I mean, honestly, I switched to Xfinity so I can make sure I had Marquee, right? Because I needed to be able to watch. I live outside of Indianapolis, and so I never got it locally anyway, and so I needed to have that channel. But it's great to be able to pull that up, and I get to watch Cole Wright and have him do his thing. We've had him on the show. We've had Tony Andracki here on the show. Now we've got you. I really appreciate the coverage that you all are putting out there and the access to be able to have one place, right? Other than the occasional Friday night when we can watch. I have Apple TV Plus, so I can watch those games now too.
Nice.
But having everything there, right, front to back, nose to tail coverage. So again, appreciate everything that you're doing there, and I look forward to seeing how this all plays out over the next year. It should be fun.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's been so much fun. So I'm looking forward to even more access with the players and a more normal year.
So Taylor, I wanted to ask you just a couple not necessarily personal questions here before we end the show, but you're new to Chicago. How much time have you spent in Chicago? Had you spent in Chicago before you got the job with the Cubs?
So my best friend from college lived here before I got the job. So having her here was huge, Just that instant comfort level. And I had visited her. I had come as a visitor with the Rockies. I came to a wedding here in college. I had visited maybe 5, 6, 7 times before. Been to Wrigley twice, 2 different series. So limited in a way. But I always said I would love to live in Chicago. I knew that. And so when this job came open, it was sort of too good to be true. Wait, I can move to Chicago and, my 20s and have a fun life there and cover the Cubs, like sign me up. So it didn't really go according to plan because the pandemic hit and I couldn't have as much of a social life as I wanted to, but it's still been great. So I'm looking forward to the summertime shy that everybody talks about. And it's awesome in Chicago that we play day games for a lot of reasons. But one of those, you can go out to dinner with your crew or with your friends on Fridays and Saturdays. So I'm looking forward to this summer for sure.
So have you had an old style in the bleachers or just in Wrigley?
I have. Yes. I did have a lot of fun out in the bleachers. That I was telling you, that game against the Diamondbacks 2016, we were there for a wedding. And so there was a ton of my college friends in town and we had a college-like time out in the bleachers and it was great. It was so much fun. And again, I'm not kidding when I say, I remember thinking, if I could work here, that would be as good as it gets. Because the electricity in that stadium, I just remember it was captivating. It was so much fun. So yes.
Especially in 2016, right?
Yeah.
Yes. It was the perfect time. And it was funny because a bunch of my friends got Cubs gear and, kind of followed them throughout the year. And then they won the World Series. So I think some of my friends took credit because they were the newfound Cubs fans, but I do not let them take any credit.
Why not?
Hey, I take credit for it because I left the bar where I was at during the rain delay because I said if I left, then they would win. So I think all of us, whatever we've got to do to tell ourselves that we had a part of it, I think we try.
I'm the queen of that. I'm about as superstitious as it gets, unfortunately.
Awesome. Well, it's been awesome having you today, Taylor. It's been great getting to know you. Thanks so much for joining us, and good luck this season.
Thanks so much for having me. This was so much fun, John. I was glad I got to meet you. And Evan, I look forward to having you out to Chicago, both of you guys together. And you'll be out enjoying a nice cold one out in the bleachers. I will be working, but I'll wave to you and I'll come say hi. How about that?
Sounds good.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Thanks, Taylor.
Thanks a lot, Taylor.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.
See ya. All right, cool. That was fun. It's always fun.
Well,
being
it's nice
able
to have a guest and shake things up, so it's not just you and me bitching about what the Cubs have done or whatever.
Ranting.
But it is really cool though to get that perspective. And I think that goes back to something it's been a while since we talked about it, but when we had, Sahadev Sharma and Tony Andracki, I mentioned some of those guys who cover the team, and how the last couple years, certainly 2020, they weren't able to really get and tell those stories, right? That you would normally to not just to get to know the guys, but to find out more the personal stuff. Because when you're on a Zoom conference call, like, everybody's got access to the same questions and the same answers, but it's those little things that you kind of pick up that, in the first, hey, you might have 5 conversations with somebody, and the first 4 of those, none of that's ever being reported. None of it's ever going to be the actual story. But those things all then feed into what the story eventually becomes. And I think that's one of the most important things that a lot of us don't ever see, right? We read the story, or we hear, we might hear Taylor report on it, but we don't know what all went into that. And the trust that you've got to build with someone, the rapport for them to actually share some of those things. And like I said, that is what's cool to me. And I'm so stoked after yesterday. I can't tell you how excited I was. Like, that last night was when baseball,
that was cool,
like, officially brought it back for me, because we've been saying for a while, like, I've been putting it out there. I said Ethan Roberts will make the roster, because I've been trying to speak it into existence. I was like, he deserves it. He's going to make it. I know he will. But to see that happen, to see his reaction to it, and to know that it was going on, man, that was so neat. And I'm just so happy for him and his family, to see that, and again, to look at it, be like, I've gotten to interview Justin Steele. I actually did at that Cubs convention Taylor was talking about. I've gotten to interview Justin Steele a couple times. We've had Scott Efros on the show a couple times. We had Ethan on the show. Now there's these guys that are up with the club that, while there are some other things that I may not be real happy with about the direction that the team is making, I feel personally invested in the fact that I actually know some of these people as human beings. And I'm very, very excited to watch them perform. And so that part of it means a lot to me. If I strip away any objectivity at all, and I can just look at it and say, like, you know what, this is cool, because I get to watch Ethan pitch, not Roberts, not this guy, this rookie they called up. Like, someone who I've gotten to know. And I love that about this season, even if other things maybe are not what I would prefer. So,
well, that was kind of what Taylor was talking about, right? Was like getting involved at the beginning of something, and what you're talking about is even more so, right? Where it's like even before the beginning, I guess, right? Is when they're in the minor leagues, and that's something that we've always valued, is the relationships that we have with those minor league players. And then you start to kind of see them going up and moving up into the organization. And that was something that we haven't really experienced. I mean, you have a relationship with Mike Bryant, Chris Bryant's dad, but that was still a little different. I mean, that happened after Chris had already kind of made it, and Chris was a star even before he became, a major league player. And so, yeah, like seeing these guys like that are in the minor leagues that you and the show have developed a relationship with, make it up. I mean, you can't help but root for them, right? I mean, like, they're obviously major underdogs heading into the season, but who knows? I mean, like I said, you go 9-1, so at least you've got some excitement going on.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we talked about that when I was out there. Say, is that likely with the Brewers coming to town to open with 4 games? No, but hey, you go 9-1. That's 8 games over 5. You go 500 the rest of the year. You're 8 games over 500 to finish with 6 teams in the league making the playoffs. That probably gets you in now. And really, the real key, right? We talked about last year, and we talked about how things went. And again, if a frog had wings, he wouldn't bump his ass when he hopped. So we got to be careful with how we put these hypothetical situations out there. But
we're Cubs fans. That's what we do, man.
Well, that's true. But I mean, they had 2 double-digit losing streaks, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's what sank them. It wasn't like, I mean, because they had they were just smoking hot through a lot of May and June, up till June 24th, and then the wheels fell off, and then you have a couple of those. So, again, I think on paper they're certainly improved from what they were, after the trade deadline. But again, I think there is, while I believe there are other things, I've made note of those many, many times that I think they should have done. what they are, right, is there are a lot of guys, and there's more coming, right? There's more of them that'll be coming up, and I look at guys like going down those backfields and watching a lot of those young guys play, whether that be Brennan Davis, James Triantos, Owen Casey, right? Very different levels of the organization. Scott Kobos, Max Bain, right? I got to talk to Max for a while. Again, two-time guest of the show right there. He and Efros both. And to see what happens with those guys in the minors and how that development path goes. There are a lot of things that, for as much as I could, but you know what? At the end of the day, I can complain about it, but I'm reasonably sure that neither Tom Ricketts nor Jed Hoyer listens to me or reads me, at least in terms of trying to determine what they should do. And so no amount of me complaining about it is going to change things. So now that it's started, now that we're past the point of me trying to be like, well, you should make these moves, I kind of resign myself. Like I said, hey, your boys have baseball going on. My son's got baseball going on, no pun intended, pretty much full swing. We got a meeting tonight with the athletic director and then the team breakout where they're getting their jerseys. And so I'm like, hey, man, I've got so much time devoted to that the last thing I really need to do, I say, as I posted 2 articles this morning, one of which is about how the Cubs are still the most expensive experience in baseball. The other about how they added Dan Gilbert to their bid consortium for Chelsea. So I say I'm not going to be negative, and I've written 2 things this morning that are laying out the business side. But
the Ricketts make it pretty easy, right? They set that up.
I mean, it's low hanging fruit, right? It's not like I had to go digging for this stuff,
Sadly.
And they're probably, I mean, it sounds like they're like way out front of the Chelsea bid at this point. Is what it sounds like. But, I didn't go to a game at Wrigley last year. I don't think I did I? No, I don't think I did.
Is that the first year or?
It's the first year since 2001.
Wow.
That I haven't been.
You got to get out there this year.
Well, right. Well, I mean, 2020, I couldn't, right? I went to 2 games on the rooftop, right? So like kind of I did, but nobody went to a game in Wrigley. So I went to, I saw them play the Reds in Cincinnati. So I went to a Cubs game. I saw the Yankees and Rangers play in Arlington, and I saw the A's and Rockies play in Denver. So I went to major league games, and I did go to a Cubs game. I did not go to Wrigley. A lot of that was the timing, right? With my son's baseball and everything else. And I was kind of like, I didn't want to go early. I went to a South Bend Cubs game. So I absolutely have to get back, and it's a timing thing. But now a lot of that is the personal investment of being able to go. And what's funny is last year I went to see, the Iowa Cubs came through town, right? Play the Indianapolis Indians here. I went one time. I got to talk with Scott Efros, right? Saw him pitch there. And as I'm talking to him, Justin Steele was doing rehab. So I talked to Justin Steele here. The next time they come through, Ethan Roberts is up with him. And I talked to Ethan. And so what a trip it would be, right? These guys came through and I got to see them all play AAA ball. And now they're all going to be up with the Cubs. All 3 of those guys are up with the Chicago Cubs on the opening day roster, as a part of the team. And that, again, that to me is something that I am far more invested in than, really maybe the machinations of the greater organization at this point, because I can't affect that, but I can support people that I respect and appreciate and just enjoy that, as a person, even beyond being a fan. So that's really cool. But like I said, man, excuse me, I'm not actually getting choked up now, like in a emotional sense. I just got a dry throat, but I was. I mean, it was, dude, legit cutting onions. You know what I mean? Last night, it was awesome. So, anyway.
Well, I'll tell you, dude, the Cubs this year are set up to, obviously there's not a lot of expectations around the team, but they do have some talented players. And there is a world where, where you can convince yourself, where you could look at this team and say, this is a group of guys that could get on a hot streak, right? I mean, it's not, it wouldn't be the craziest thing that's ever happened in the sport for them to get on a hot streak. And it certainly is kind of the group of guys that it would be a lot of fun if they did get on a hot streak and if they did get out and start going and doing really well.
Yeah, I mean, they could. And I was just trying to, again, here's production value. Good thing we don't have a guest on. I was going to reply to you, but I'm on my computer that doesn't type. And so I would say we just go ahead and do the preview because I will not be here on Thursday. I'm going to be out of town. So I'd say we could go ahead and rock a little preview here to close the show out, maybe.
Yeah, so I haven't even looked at the pitching.
You probably don't
matchups.
Want to. You probably don't want to.
But it's the Cubs are opening on Thursday. The weather's been kind of a little shaky. It now looks like I have a ticket to opening day, and I was going to go out there, and now I've said no, I'm not going to go out there. And then my buddy out in Chicago, which obviously we know some people in Chicago, just FYI, he's telling me, oh man, the weather's changing. The weather is changing. So let's look to see the forecast for the weather. It looked really bad.
What is it going to be like 43 and not rainy instead of like 40 and rainy?
46 right now and cloudy instead of rain.
Hey,
but it does look rain and snow on Friday.
Well, that's downright balmy.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting, but Saturday and Sunday look like it's going to be okay. So perhaps they get a double header in if they can't get the game in on Friday. But opening day looks like it's a go. Going to be a little chilly. Cubs, Kyle Hendricks on the bump. It goes Hendricks, Steele, Marcus Stroman, and then who's fourth?
Probably Smiley because they want to go right, left.
It didn't look particularly good yesterday, as a matter of fact.
No,
that game was crazy.
No. Yeah, and I think the thing here's the thing to note too is we saw Jesse Chavez went, I think, 3 innings the day before, and then Smiley, did he end up getting 3? But he's not been stretched out, nor has Alec Mills. I think we see Jesse Chavez in like a piggyback type situation. I think the guys at the back end of that rotation with Smiley and Mills are going to be heavily dependent upon the bullpen. More so than maybe what we'd expect. I mean, in general, you kind of find that, but I think that'll be more the plan than like, we'll have these guys ready just in case, but more like, hey, man, if you make it 3 innings, that's gravy. You know what I mean? So I think that'll be the key. But, yeah, it looks like the Brewers are going to have – so that you got Corbin Burns, Brandon Woodruff, Freddie Peralta, and probably Adrian Hauser for their first 4. And if you look at what was it, 15-4 or 14-5 that they went against the Cubs. Either way, they steamrolled the Cubs pretty easily last year. And having to face those first 3, you were talking about some very serious, some hard-throwing, nasty junk dudes that the Brewers are going to put out there. So that's where the optimistic 9-1 start. But, hey, you never know. I mean, the whole thing is those guys will limit you, but, maybe some things happen. And we saw yesterday, Smiley didn't have a good game, but the Cubs really exploded offensively. For all of their flaws and the lower upside, I think, that we see with this lineup than what we've seen in the past, it does appear to be a little bit more balanced, right? In terms of, Nick Madrigal hit a home run, but I mean, with him, he appears to be healthy. Nico Horner, I really like what Clint Frazier's bringing. We saw Happ hit a big bomb yesterday. Suzuki seems to be getting his timing. I mean, I don't feel great about the lineup by any stretch, but this at least does not feel like that boom or bust type of deal where you're going to see them break out for 15 runs one game and then get shut out 2 in a row and then score 1 run and then come back and score 10, in the fourth.
Well, and that's kind of the most interesting thing about starting with the Brewers is that the Cubs have erred on the side of high contact guys. And I've been complaining a lot about it because it just doesn't seem like they have any power. But we're going to find out right away if that is a good approach or not, because they're in situations that you want high contact guys. Mm-hmm. And this would be a series that, in prior years with, Javi Baez and Chris and all the other big names that were on the team before, it would be boom or bust type of situation, right? Where you could see them like, not having very much offense at all. But this team was built for this, right? This team is kind of constructed in a way that they should be in the game as long as they get some decent pitching.
Yeah, I mean that's I think that's the other real issue, right? Is that they did construct the lineup to have a lot of contact. Unfortunately, their rotation gives up a lot of contact, right? That's
but they've got a good defense, though, right?
Yeah, I mean they on paper, I think, except for the fact that, and what I don't like is the idea that Jason Hayward gets shifted over to center, where he is not nearly as adept defensively. I mean, he is an average to slightly below average center fielder, right?
Do you think
he's good.
He's the starting center fielder?
He's going to be the starting center fielder. I mean, should he be? No. But the way it's set up, it doesn't look like they're even willing to relegate him to a bench role. I mean, it'd be one thing, that they don't want to DFA him, which, again, I get it, even though realistically that's probably the best move organizationally at this point. But they're also not making him a bench bat. So a little bit odd there for a variety of reasons. But I think we'll see some different lineups. I think Ross is going to tinker with some stuff. I think you're going to see all kinds of pitchers this opening weekend, these first 4 days, just because, again, limited amount of time. Stroman's really the only one who we saw get stretched out much at all. Even Hendricks wasn't going beyond really 3 innings in most of these games. So the bullpen's going to be integral, more so than usual, these first couple of weeks in particular as they go through the rotation, get these guys stretched. So, and I don't know where the Brewers are at on that. So we might see some of that same thing. And you never know, man. I mean, you catch somebody right way. I mean, look what happened when they rolled the Dodgers in the past and they jumped all over Clayton Kershaw, early in that. They had that 7-inning doubleheader where they just destroyed a couple of those guys, and Kershaw lasted like 2/3 of an inning. So many, many stranger things have happened. So,
well, the Brewers lineup, it doesn't exactly strike fear into your heart there, and they do not have much offense. And so when you start thinking about it, the weather is going to be cold. There's not going to be a lot of offense, even if there were a lot of high potent bats in the lineups. And so it really, it's lining up to I don't want to say it favors the Cubs, but it certainly plays into how this team was constructed to go out there against a team that doesn't have a lot of offense, but does have very good pitching and scratch out some runs. So yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's, hey, hope springs eternal, right? It's there. And there's a certain, I was noting this, like I have enjoyed watching the last few games, the NCAA tournament, because there's no teams in it. I didn't actually care for either of the teams last night. I had zero rooting interest whatsoever. But I didn't have like an active hatred for either of them, and none of the teams I like were in it. And so there is a freedom in that. Now, obviously, we can't completely take a horse out of the race with the Cubs, but when you have really low expectations, it's very difficult for the team to actually fall below them. So, it's entirely possible that we're looking at this just kind of negatively, or even if you're not, all the way out on them, you're probably not super high on them. And, maybe some of these guys will surprise. And that's like what I said. So, like, rather than trying to look at I don't expect the team to be very competitive or successful or finish better than third in the division, right? I just don't. And so and
that's realistic.
Yeah. And so I'm making it more of a point to, like, I'm going to follow some guys, right? I want to follow some of these stories. I want to see what these guys do. And, and then maybe I'll end up being pleasantly surprised, or at least I'll be able to enjoy kind of watching some stories unfold a little bit further that we've been able to follow for the past several years as they've come up through the system. And now we're seeing that evolve. So, that's kind of where I'm at on it. I'm excited for it, but it does feel weird that it's like, oh, wait, spring training's over today. Oh, the season starts on Thursday?
The last game.
Really? What? Weird. So it'd be kind of wild, but it's good. It's good.
Yeah, it is good. So we are going to try to do a show. We'll see how this works, but we're going to try to get the cadence down of doing a show kind of before, after each series this year, and we'll see if that lines up with our schedules and we're actually able to pull that off. But I think going into it, that's the intent, at least. So I think as we do that, do you want to give a chance here? You want to try to give me your prediction on this series outcome, this first series against the Brewers? 4 games at Wrigley Field.
I don't as after all we just talked about, kind of talking it up. I still think if the Cubs split, that would surprise me a great deal. So I think they go 1-3. I don't think they can overcome the Brewers pitching.
I am going to predict a split because I'm going to be optimistic here. I do think that they could come in and with the bats, you never know what's going to happen, but with the weather, it kind of seems very unlikely that you're going to get a lot of offense, but they could scratch out a few runs here and there. I don't expect any of these games to be high scoring. If they are high scoring, it's probably because there's been errors and mistakes made. So, which is also possible. So we'll see how it goes, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say 2-2 to start the season. And then let's take a look. Who do they play in the next series? They actually travel away, I believe, right?
There will be some games where they play
against
away.
The Pirates.
Hey,
that is how it works.
That is a little bit of a softer landing.
Exactly. So let me just look at the schedule real quick. I just want to pull that up. So that they play the Brewers to start, which obviously a little rough, but it's at home. 2 against the Pirates, at Pittsburgh, 4 against the Rockies and old friend Chris Bryant at Colorado. They come back home against Tampa, which could be rough. And then they have 4 against the Pirates at home, close out the month at Atlanta and then at Milwaukee. So the middle part of that feels not terrible. Pittsburgh, Colorado, Pittsburgh again. But we'll see. I mean, it's also one of those things where you look at the schedule and you're like, okay, yeah, things could work out well. It could also be really awful. Like if they lose a bunch of those games in there, like to the Pirates and to the Rockies, chances are it's going to be a really, really long season because they're probably not doing well against the Rays. They're probably not doing well against the Braves, and they play the Brewers 6 times in the month. So it's like that's teeing up to possibly be really ugly. So let's hope that does not happen.
Yeah, well, we'll see. They could catch a little bit of a heater in there, but I'll be quite surprised if they're not a few games under 500 by the time the month closes. Right? They've got this is a tough month. They close it. I think it's a little bit easier. They get the Reds and Pirates a lot. I think at the end of the season.
But by then, I mean,
right then it doesn't really matter. I mean, who knows? It might be a totally different team. They might be on par with those teams by that point. So, but yeah, I mean, I think I'm just looking to see what happens. I believe this first series is going to see a lot of different lineup stuff. Guys kind of getting, mixed around here and there between different positions. Who do they use as DH? How do they handle the pitching? Because again, 28-man roster, short spring training, late start of the season, a lot of different factors in there. So it's still going to be a little bit funky here as they get their feet under them. But like I said, it'll be nice to watch real baseball, where the outcomes matter, see how that happens and find out, again, from some of these guys like Swandell and Wisdom, can they maintain what we saw from them last year? If not to the same extent, right? I don't think we expect that completely, but some semblance of that performance. How does Seiya Suzuki adjust? What do we see from some of these new guys in the bullpen? How does that rotation hold up? I mean, there's so many questions, but yeah, I mean, getting a chance to finally watch some baseball with maybe not a packed house yet at Wrigley, but at least they're allowing 100% capacity. Now the only thing stopping it is
for a packed house.
Yeah, now the only thing stopping it is weather and just malaise.
Yeah, it's just general mediocrity. Cool. Well, we'll circle back. Maybe we'll try to do a show on Monday. The Brewers series goes through the weekend on Sunday, so we'll either do a show on Monday or Tuesday in advance of the Pirates series. And yeah, hopefully all goes well for the Cubs. And we're talking about a series split or win.
I dig it.
Crossed.
We'll see.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. Until then, we'll see you
later.